A special presentation of CNN Newstand. People Profile.
Welcome to Newsstand. I'm Willow Bay. Tonight we'll enter the world of a man who made us rethink our ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and our feelings about frogs and pigs. A man who introduced us to a whole new circle of friends. Tonight, People Profiles, Jim Henson.
Hey, Jim.
Oh, hi there, Big Bird.
Have a nacho? Jim was a very nice man. He often came around Sesame Street.
Everybody liked him.
I mean, how many neighborhoods have a Cookie Monster, a Grover, and a little cute red guy named Elmo?
I'm kind of your average, everyday, talking, singing, dancing frog in show business, you know?
If people want to think my father was like Kermit, they're pretty darn close.
He was just incredibly talented, but so gentle.
All of the characters that he created also had gentleness that he had, except for his piggy.
The thing I really loved about him is he really was a visionary.
He was amazing.
I think people don't today understand how groundbreaking the Muppets were.
It's not that easy being green.
He had no idea how sick
Having
he
to
was.
spend each day the color of the leaves.
His death was so shocking.
When I think it could be.
It was just completely shocking.
Jim was a very special, remarkable man whose vision and compassion and humanity touched us all.
He had no limits to his imagination.
I
sure wish he was still around. We could use a little bit more wild, amazing stuff these days.
And I think it's what I want to be.
He was kind of quiet, and yet he had that special thing. I've heard the word is called charisma. He just seemed to have a glow about him. He was special.
James Maury Henson was born in Greenville, Mississippi on September 24th, 1936, to Paul and Betty Henson. Jimmy, as he was called by his family, was the second of 2 sons. He spent his early years in a small town called Leland, just a dozen miles from the Mississippi River.
His father was with the agriculture department at the agricultural station in Leland, Mississippi, which is right next to Greenville. And that area is there's a lot of blues and Southern literature. And I think that Jim had a feeling for the Delta. And I think a lot of the things about Kermit and the things, the way he would talk and all, reflect a lot of the time that he spent on the creek, in Deer Creek.
Jimmy and his brother Paul were raised as Christian Scientists who don't believe in traditional medicine. The boys seemed to enjoy a typical small-town American childhood, but Paul was especially shy, and their mom felt she needed to give him a little extra attention. When Jimmy was left alone, he sought out the company of his maternal grandmother, who was known simply as Dear.
She was always wonderful to be around for young people. She enjoyed young people's thoughts and creativity, and she always was an inspiration for Jim.
Dear was a voracious reader. She was also an artist and quilt maker, and she encouraged Jimmy to use his imagination.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
Jimmy discovered the movies, and his imagination was ignited by the first movie he ever saw, The Wizard of Oz. He also discovered radio, which was still in its golden age. He loved the radio comedians, especially ventriloquist Edgar Bergen and his famous dummies, Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd.
Well, Mortimer, greetings and salutations.
He would say that my father was his first inspiration in terms of creating a character, writing for that character, and not writing down to a character.
When Jimmy was in the 5th grade, his father took a job with the Agriculture Department in Washington, D.C., and the family moved to Hyattsville, Maryland. It was there that Jimmy discovered television, and he fell in love with it. The television age was new. In 1946, right after World War II, there were 7,000 television sets in the United States. 1 year later, the television audience had grown to 1 million. Jimmy desperately wanted his family to get a TV, and in 1950, they finally did.
There was a new media, the new and exciting media on the scene. Bert Hillstrom was on television with the Kuklapolitans.
I knew this was going to be this kind of meeting. There's not room for me in this group. That's the whole thing.
Well, let's adjourn and
You're
we'll come
both
back.
against me.
We'll just
That's
adjourn and
all,
come
because
back.
I'm a
and
dragon. Oh, that's
Oh, for goodness sake, Ollie.
Jimmy loved Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. Another favorite was the off-the-wall comedy of Ernie Kovacs. With his innovative style, Kovacs was testing the limits of television.
You caught me, didn't you?
Young Jimmy Henson's passion was television, and at the age of 16, he approached all the television studios in Washington to find a job. In the summer of 1954, after his high school graduation, WTOP-TV in Washington, D.C. was looking for someone to perform puppets on a local Saturday morning program. Although he wasn't looking to be a puppeteer, Jimmy took the job, which paid only $10 a day. But as Jim Henson said, it was just a means to an end. It was a way to get into television. That job lasted only weeks, but he quickly got another at WRC-TV, again as a puppeteer. There he teamed up with another puppeteer, Jane Nebel, his future wife.
We met in a puppet class at the University of Maryland. Jim was just coming out of high school, and I was in the senior class in art education.
Jim and Jane's first assignment together was a puppet segment for a magazine show aimed at homemakers. Their puppets would lip-sync to comedy records. The station liked the act, and soon they were given their own 5-minute show. It was seen twice a day. The first at 6:25 in the evening, before the Huntley-Brinkley Report. Then at 11:25, just before The Tonight Show.
We had very sophisticated adult audiences right from the beginning, and I think it was very adventurous of the station to be willing to program our puppets at that time. They weren't really, we were, really pretty amateur, but always good. Jim's work was always good, even if it was a little rough.
Which one of us is going to get off first?
Well, here. Well, let me try to get down first.
All right. Hold
up there. Ho.
Jim's new show was called Sam and Friends, and Jim got to do everything from constructing the props and backgrounds to designing the puppets. He wanted these puppets to look different from the traditional puppets that had been used on television before. Jim called his new creations Muppets. Some say it was because they were a cross between a puppet and a marionette. Jim said he just liked the sound of the word.
I think that's one thing that was always unique about him and the Muppets. He created the Muppets to get into television. He didn't create the Muppets and then somebody said, wow, those Muppets are great, we got to put them on television. It was all calculated the other way. He thought, I've got something I can do that would work on television. And it's interesting, because if you look at like the early TV sets and the shape and the rounded corners and stuff like that, it's a Muppet shape, you know? The Muppets were created to go on a TV screen, and they use just the screen, so that the television set itself becomes the puppet stage.
Oh, black magic has me in a spell. Oh, black magic that you weave so well.
Those icy fingers up and down my spine.
The same old witchcraft when your eyes meet mine.
Sam's friends included Kermit, one of Jim's very first Muppets, although he was not quite a frog yet. He was more lizard-like, without flippers. He was made from Jim's mother's old coat and a ping-pong ball cut in half for the eyes.
You have to remember also this was in the early days of television when it was black and white and it was live. And so even for human performers, very often they would blacken their lips and they would darken their eyes because it was all about the eyes and the mouth. And my father took that concept and applied it to the puppets. It's filling the screen, and what matters is the eye focus and the lip sync. That's it. And the script.
The scripts were good, and Jim's Muppets were a huge hit. But at a time when Jim was celebrating his new success, he also suffered a tragic loss. His brother Paul was killed in a car accident.
They were very close. They did things a lot together. And I think he also felt that his parents had lost a lot by losing Paul. So I think he felt that he wanted to accomplish a lot because of that, but also because he always wanted to accomplish a lot. He was someone who really enjoyed the idea of becoming successful and accomplishing a lot. He always felt that he would be successful.
And he was. How many college students arrive at graduation in their own Rolls Royce? Jim had earned his degree in fine arts while working on Sam and Friends, which aired for 6 years. Although he didn't set out to become a puppeteer, it clearly was his calling. Jim Henson and his Muppets found a home in the place he loved best, television.
Help! Help! Help!
You're obsessed about this Jim Henson thing, aren't you? You want to talk about it?
Look down underneath you.
There's a man down there.
That's a puppeteer.
Jim Henson and his unique Muppets had become an act. When Sam and Friends went off the air in 1961, the Muppets kept busy doing television commercials.
You say you love Wilson certified bologna?
No, I don't fall for that stuff.
You will.
They were also getting booked on many of the television variety shows of the 60s, including The Ed Sullivan Show. And Jim's Muppets became regulars on The Jimmy Dean Show, a down-home country western variety show. The quick-witted piano-playing Rolf was featured with Jimmy Dean every week in a 7 to 8 minute segment.
You are a real good friend. Oh, you can always count on me, Jimmy.
Rolf was performed by Jim Henson, but since the Muppets were no longer lip-syncing to records, Jim had to learn to interact in character with a live performer.
Just a perfect friendship.
Ralph always was relaxed, happy, everything was okay, you know, and he loved to play the piano, but if it went wrong, then it was okay, you know, and I think that was largely, you know, my father. That's what he would try to do, you know, that's the way he was.
Jim Henson was a devoted family man. He'd married fellow puppeteer Jane Nebel in 1959. Soon, daughters Lisa and Cheryl were born, followed by Brian, John, and then Heather. When Jim's work, including a weekly spot on the Today Show, demanded he be in New York, the whole family came along.
When we started having babies, I always worked a little bit, but we very soon knew that we needed more people, and Jim had wanted to bring in other people anyway.
Jerry Juhl was brought in first. Jim hired Jerry to replace Jane as a performer. He then became Jim's head writer.
It was a very kind of crazy, flying by the seat of your pants kind of time. We would all go off and, you know, carry the stuff across town when you couldn't find cabs, and to the studios and set up and shoot, and, you know. So we were performing and we were doing everything.
Next, Jim hired master puppet builder Don Celine, and then 19-year-old Frank Oz joined the team.
I was big game hunting in Africa, fella.
Big game hunting?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, what game?
Monopoly. That's a big game in Africa, didn't you know that?
Ultimately, Frank Oz would become Jim's key performing partner. The magic of their collaboration could be seen with two characters, named Ernie and Bert.
Fishy, fishy, fishy. 3 fish, 4 fish, 5 fish.
Wow! Ernie, that's terrific. Let me try, okay?
Sure.
How do I do it?
Just make
It
sure.
was just kind of there. It was like playing catch, you know. He would throw, I would catch. I would throw, he would catch. And you can't explain why it feels good. It just does, and it feels right.
Yeah, fishy, 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 fishy!
You cold? We were so opposite. I was more of a and to a degree still am, but as I get older I'm not, a bit more neurotic. Jim was more patient, very playful.
Ernie and Bert were created in 1969 for Sesame Street, a new kids show for public television.
Sunny day, sweeping the clouds away.
When the Children's Television Workshop put together a team of people to create a program for preschoolers, Jim Henson was brought into the mix. Joan Gans Cooney was in charge of the project.
I hired 3 producers, 3 very talented producers, all of whom had at one time or another been on Captain Kangaroo, so they really knew children's programming. And they said to me, do you know Jim Henson? And I said, I know his work. And they said, well, why don't we try to get him? And I said, we could get Jim Henson, I mean, because he was the best there was. He came to 1 or 2 of our seminars in the summer of '68. And it was this tall, bearded man with his sort of hippie way of dressing. You would notice him, let me say. And we talked him into it.
She plugged, you know, the whole Henson organization in at the very top because it just brought such a sense of fun to the whole project. The last thing we wanted to do is try and implant a camera in a classroom kind of effect.
A fireman is a person in your neighborhood. In your neighborhood.
I think that playfulness with life and with learning added an enormous dimension to the show that never would have happened without him.
Okay, this is near.
With Sesame Street, Jim Henson introduced a whole new gang of Muppets.
This is fun!
C is for cookie, that's good enough for me.
Cookie Monster, Oscar the Grouch, and an 8-foot-tall yellow bird all grew out of Jim's fertile imagination.
But, like you, I'm not old enough to cross the street by myself. So
Jim hired puppeteer Caroll Spinney to play Big Bird.
To me, that was the equivalent of, if I was a drummer, having some fellow say, I've got a little band from Liverpool, then would you like to be me drummer? Because it was Jim Henson. Jim Henson and the Muppets, to me, were the Beatles completely of the puppet world.
how can people know I'm coming if I don't have a horn?
Oscar, with this car, everybody knows you're coming. The personalities of each Muppet is so defined that makes it wonderful from an acting point of view because they're so kind of predictable.
Hi all, this is Kermit the Frog of Sesame Street News, and today...
Kermit, the character Jim created years before, joined this new group of Muppets. By now, Kermit was a frog, complete with a collar and flippers. From the very beginning, Sesame Street had reinvented children's television.
And welcome to Once the Peace Theater. Me, your host, Alistair Cookie. And
the show was hip and funny and attracted young children as well as their parents. Sure, kids learned their numbers and ABCs, but Mom and Dad were also being entertained, and Hollywood's biggest stars were very eager to make a guest appearance.
Hi. I've been sent to interview Oscar the Grouch about his sock collection.
I love her attitude.
You want to kiss up to your kids, and you do anything. It's just, what do I have to do to get on the show? You want to do that for your children.
Jim's own children didn't mind that their father never stopped working. In addition to the Muppets, Jim also contributed some of the animated teaching pieces for the show.
He used to stay up almost all night, painting each and every little stroke for the numbers that would go, count up and then count back down again. And that was one of the really favorite ones.
Jim worked so hard, and he was not a workaholic. It's hard for people to understand. The reason Jim worked so hard is he loved it. He enjoyed it.
He always had such a ball when he was at work, and that was one reason why we used to love to go and visit him. And also, we were always welcome at work. No matter how young we were, we would hang around the shooting studio and in the workshop and even go to meetings and stuff and be playing in the corner, and he was always fine with that.
When we were growing up, we weren't very aware of my father being famous, that there was much more of a sense that he was always very involved in his work and he loved what he did, and he always brought us into what he was doing.
loved to play, and he loved to goof around. So I think we spent a lot of time goofing around as a family. He was also a very gentle and caring father. I remember even when he would work sort of endless hours, he'd pretty much always come home every night at some point to like tuck us in.
Whether or not he came home every night to tuck them in, I don't know. He certainly enjoyed being with them when he could. If they remember it as every night, that's nice, isn't it? I don't think it was every night.
In 1998, the Muppet family celebrated the 30th anniversary of Sesame Street, a show which could never have achieved such phenomenal success without Jim Henson and his Muppet creations.
From what I understand, his genius was for coming up with kind of wild, amazing things that nobody had ever seen before. He just did a fantastic job of that, and I guess he was my kind of guy.
Oh, rubber ducky, you're the one.
With the success of Sesame Street, Jim Henson had become an icon in the world of children's television. But Jim didn't want to get stuck there. After all, his early work, like Sam and Friends, had been geared toward adults, and he wanted to do more of that.
And at that point, I think he was frustrated because he was saying, well, hang on, the Muppets, we've been performing in Las Vegas, and we do the Ed Sullivan Show. This was the only kid show we did just because it's a big hit. Doesn't mean that's all we can do. That's not what we ever were.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Muppets Valentine Show.
Jim had been given the opportunity to produce several television specials, but he wanted more. Then, in 1975, Jim was asked to do Muppet sketches for a new NBC late-night show called Saturday Night Live.
I had enormous respect for Jim, and it was fine for me wherever he was going to head, you know, because it would at least be interesting.
This is the mighty Favard. How many in your party?
Jim's segments were dramatically different from what the audience had come to expect from him.
What are you doing, hater?
Why? Nobody quite knew what to do with the Muppets on Saturday Night Live because, and they were, of course, they were given a little more latitude there, so what they did was a little weirder, a little more on the edge.
What I want, Angel Buns, is not on the menu. Come here, you. Yeah.
We certainly didn't get Kermit. I would have much preferred Kermit and the sort of more joyous characters, but there were really some really funny characters in it, and it had a real freshness to it.
The cast of Saturday Night Live became the hit, not Jim Henson's Muppets. In fact, the Muppets were gone after just one season.
Chevy and Danny and everybody got really, really popular and created a different style of comedy to the degree that we didn't really fit in the show anymore. But he was, I think, not disappointed as much as excited the next step he was going on.
Jim finally got the opportunity that he was looking for. He had produced a pilot for a primetime Muppet show, but again, the networks weren't interested. The pilot, however, was seen by British entertainment tycoon Lord Lou Grade, who put Jim's new show into worldwide syndication.
It's time to play the music. It's time to light the light. It's time to meet the Muppets on the Muppet Show tonight.
In 1976, The Muppet Show premiered. It was a variety show with a cast of odd yet delightful Muppet co-stars.
By the time I did The Muppet Show, I'd run into Fozzie Bear, and Miss Piggy joined us at that point, and Gonzo, of course, and all those guys, Rizzo the Rat, all those people.
The Muppet Show was so much fun. So much fun. We had such a wonderful bunch of friends there. And all these stars came through every week. Oh, it was great.
Soon, the Muppet set was the place to be. Again, the biggest celebrities couldn't wait to perform with Jim Henson's Muppets.
Hey, fellas, you know, I really don't mind your drilling for oil in my dressing room, but your camel just stepped on my guitar and broke it.
Do not worry about the guitar. We will buy you a new one.
It was hilarious. I mean, it was great. Not just my family, everybody. I mean, other entertainers were going, wow, I mean, you were there with Miss Piggy and Kermit, so it doesn't get any better than that.
It just exploded. Everybody wanted the show. Everybody, I mean, they just were standing in line. It was just extraordinary.
Hey, how do you get ideas for all those songs?
New ideas. Jim Henson was always open to them.
I told him that I'd always, in watching his show, I was always curious about the fact that there was never any real look or experiment with African culture or African American culture, but in particular African songs or African material. And he said that he'd be most encouraged to look into that world.
We come from the mountain, running on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, running on the mountain.
I was just absolutely astounded and overwhelmed with the beauty of it and the magic of it and how real it was.
Real, but very zany.
Say oodie boo boo boo. Say what? Boo boo boo. Say oodie boo 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 boo. Oodie boo boo boo. Now will you get off the stage?
Kermit was the only Muppet to cross over from Sesame Street. This gave Jim the opportunity to develop his character more, and as Kermit's performer, to express himself a little more. Many suggest the frog was Jim's alter ego.
Well, there's something about Kermit the Frog that always has reminded me of Jim Henson. Somehow they were a lot alike.
If people want to think my father was like Kermit, they're pretty darn close, really. I mean, Kermit and my father were pretty much one and the same in a lot of ways.
I think it was very easy for Jim to talk through Kermit and work with Kermit because it was so much part of, he was so much part of him.
They were like trying to be in charge, but not quite in control. Got all these crazies running around, creating chaos. They're just trying to keep it all together.
Kermit, is it always like this on the show?
Oh, how do you mean?
Well, all this craziness.
Oh, well, this is actually a rather quiet show for us. No unforeseen disasters so far. Hurry up, guys!
The Muppet Show aired for 5 seasons, and it was the greatest international hit of its time, airing in more than 100 countries. At its peak, The Muppet Show was seen each week by 235 million viewers.
Decent, fair, great, I loved it, Gonzo!
Jim didn't think of it in hit terms. He got to have control and play and create whatever he wanted. And that was a joy. And he loved it.
Soon, Jim found a new playground for his Muppets, the movies.
Moving those characters outside into the actual locations, into the real universe, you know, was, I think, a first.
For the Muppets' second movie, Brian Henson was now officially on his dad's film crew.
What we did in Great Muppet Caper was we said, okay, now we've seen Kermit on a bicycle, now let's see how far we can push it. We'll get them doing figure eights, and we'll get them going around in circles around each other.
Yes, couldn't we ride side by side?
He always pushed the envelope, but he just loved breaking barriers. He just loved breaking barriers.
The story runs deeper than you know.
Jim's next experiment took him to darker, more sophisticated puppetry in film.
After the success of The Muppet Show, then he wanted to break new ground and wanted to really experiment and to get out and to think new thoughts, to create new characters, new ways of approaching puppetry and what became the Dark Crystal.
Cheryl Henson worked with her father on the Dark Crystal, developing techniques that would make Jim's Muppets appear more alive.
We've got to get them out.
The Dark Crystal was the first all-puppet fantasy film that was really ever done, where there are no humans at all. And the idea that he was actually going to be creating a completely new world.
I wanted to create the world first. I wanted to start with a visual world
of what these characters looked like and what the whole place was.
The prophecy didn't say anything about this.
Movie executives did not go along for the ride.
The lights went on, and they stood up and walked out. And Jim was so depressed from that. And he was depressed from the some of the reviews. But you know, I think he would have preferred to be in this position by trying something that pushes the envelope than just being safe.
Jim tried his hand once more with a live-action fantasy film. Labyrinth was released in 1986.
What kind of magic spell to use? Slime and snails, or puppy dog's tail.
When Labyrinth was not a commercial success, that I think did. That was quite a blow to him. At that point, I think he was starting to feel like, I love the Muppets, but I have more in me. Why did this not work? How could this not have worked?
Around that time, Jim and Jane separated after 27 years of marriage. He became deeply introspective and took stock of the world that surrounded him.
It was the first time I ever saw him not want to work, was during that period. There was a few months there that he didn't want to work. He wanted to travel and stop and think and reflect a little, and that was when he wrote those letters to us.
Those letters were not to be read until Jim Henson's death.
You know, it's funny, he was always around whenever we were working, but I never got to talk to him very much, oddly enough. But, yeah, sure, I used to see him around, and I always get the impression he's still here.
Jim Henson died May 16th, 1990. His illness was sudden. His death was a shock.
Oh, God. I mean, yeah. No, it was for all of us. I mean, it's hard to talk about.
Just 4 days before his death, Jim went with his daughter, Cheryl, to visit his dad in North Carolina.
He did get sick while we were down there. A little bit of a flu, a little bit of a cough, but he was feeling weak, but he wasn't feeling sick.
Jim came home and went to his New York City apartment to rest.
He had no idea how sick he was.
It seemed like it was a sore throat and a cough. And he decided to cancel a vocal session of Kermit because he didn't feel that he had Kermit's voice.
We were making jokes about the fact that, oh, I guess he's getting to be too big a guy to join us now, you know, because it's never done that, never, first time. I mean, I remember Jim, he had walking pneumonia, and we were shooting a commercial outside in the gas station 30 years ago, and it was 5 degrees, and he should have gone to the hospital, and he was still working, you know?
I had known Jim as somebody who just could not be held down. I mean, one time he had surgery during his lunch hour, you know, and came back and worked until 8 o'clock that night.
Jane Henson spent the last night of Jim's life with him and took him to the hospital the next day. Although they'd separated 4 years earlier, they never divorced, and they were still friends.
When we went to the hospital, he dressed himself and walked down. And actually, when we went to the hospital, the taxi took us to the wrong door, to the front door instead of the emergency door. So we walked all the way around the block, which is a, pretty long way around. So I don't think either of us thought he was that sick.
I think probably when he went to the hospital that night, he knew it was coming. I think when he coughed up a little bit of blood, I think he thought, how the heck did this happen? But I think it's happened, and now I think I know what this means.
Jim died only hours after arriving at the hospital. The cause was severe pneumonia. The hospital said that getting medical attention sooner might have saved his life. Could his Christian Science upbringing have kept him away?
We were all, in the family, all of us slow to go to see doctors. And yes, the fact that he was brought up Christian Science, I'm sure that had a lot to do with that attitude.
Jim Henson was only 53 years old.
His death was so shocking. It was just completely shocking.
It was just unprocessable. I just couldn't process it for a long time.
Now, those letters Jim wrote to his kids 4 years earlier were read.
It said to love and to care and to look out for each other and to enjoy life and to look around us, to be aware, to care more than anything else.
Jim also put his final wishes in the letters.
He said, have a party, and if you want anything traditional, I kind of like the way they do it in New Orleans, so use the Dixieland band to you know, play it in and play it out. And we did.
5 days after Jim's death, a memorial service was held in New York. All of his puppeteers performed.
They asked me if I would come to the memorial service and sing Kermit the Frog's favorite song, "It's Not Easy Being Green." And so I sang it, even though I'm yellow. It's not that easy being green, having to spend the day the color of the leaves. I was so sad, it was hard to sing and not cry, too, but I made it through.
But would Jim Henson's Muppets live on? Jim was in the process of merging his company with Disney for a price of more than $100 million when he died. After his death, the deal fell through, and the Muppets stayed in the Henson family.
Jim died? But we were just starting to get to know him.
The Muppets paid tribute to their beloved Jim Henson in a television special. But one question remained. Would Jim's Kermit be there?
And if 4 whole people, why not more?
It took a while for us to decide what we were going to do with Kermit as the family. As just the family involved in that decision of how Kermit would continue and how we would do it.
Brian became president of his father's company, and the family decided that Kermit would live on. Steve Whitmire, a puppeteer who'd worked with Jim for many years, was chosen to take over the role.
It was really funny when I made eye contact with him that first time. It was like he was saying, well, come on, talk, you know, say something. And I just was freaked out. I couldn't do it. So I took the puppet and put it in another room, and I don't think I picked it up for about a month.
The reason Steve had a hard time was it's just not doing another character. He had to get in the soul of Jim to be Kermit.
And when all those people believe in you.
In the end, Kermit did appear with his friends once again.
Kermit is so much my father's character. Kermit was before The Muppet Show. Kermit was, you know, before Sesame Street. Kermit was the first character that my father really allowed to be himself.
It was terrific. You guys were great.
I think Steve does a wonderful job of Kermit, but it's not quite the same.
And maybe, even maybe.
Kermit, to me, will always be my father's Kermit.
And believe in you too.
Well, you know, it's funny about being a star. I don't really think of myself as a star. I'm just a very simple frog who's been very fortunate to do some fun stuff with fun people and make people laugh.
Sing, sing a song, sing out loud, sing it strong.
And my father, the glass was always half full. The world was always wonderful.
Not bad,
The same image that would depress somebody else was an image that he could delight in. The same circumstance that would frustrate somebody would tickle him.
Sing.
We've always done things that we liked. You know, we've tried to do a show appealing to ourselves and our own sense of humor, and so it wasn't like we've ever worked particularly for children or for adults. You know, just trying to do good entertainment.
Don't worry that it's...
I think Jim did make a contribution to puppetry in that you can approach it and do it in a successful way, that it can really appeal to everyone.
Jim, it has something to do with innocence. In an era where there ain't much innocence anywhere.
He just wanted to do good stuff, really.
I think he liked birds. He was always very nice to me.
We miss him, the essence of him coming on the set saying, hi, how you doing, what's going on, that kind of thing.
I have never met anybody who quite saw the global family as one in quite the same way that Jim did.
He's in our collective memory. I mean, my generation and down to my daughters, thank God. Probably one of the great legacies any man ever left to children was Jim Henson's.
I think the world is, you know, very much a better place for him having been here and spreading that energy.
Life's like a movie, write your own ending. Keep believing, keep pretending. We've done just what we set out to do. Thanks to the lovers, the dreamers, and you.
Next week on People Profiles, Cher.
I mean, all of my careers have been a surprise to me. You know? I mean, you hope for it, but you don't, you know, it's not something that you think. And also, you go around telling everyone, I'm going to be famous, I've practiced my autograph, whatever. And, you know, and everybody thinks you're nuts, but I mean, kind of rightfully so.